Welcome back to 80 Proof Gaming. Today I'm looking at Shadowrun Returns. It's one of those games that was on Kickstarter early, and people are looking at it saying, well, if this succeeds, then maybe Kickstarter will succeed, and if this fails, then maybe Kickstarter will fail. They're being over-dramatic, but it is an important title. Fortunately for us, there's a lot to be excited about in this game. My favorite part was the presentation. All around, it made you feel all of this nostalgia. It was amazing. I don't know how they did it, but everything felt like yesterday, but still felt fun. Sometimes you go back to those old games that you've played before, and they just feel awful. You realize that it's all just your head, making it feel like you were having more fun than you really were, because the game wasn't that good. In this case, they managed to bring back the feelings of, this game is great from yesterday, without bringing back all of the, ugh, I don't really want to play that anymore feelings. Of course, you can't really have a game from nostalgia alone. In an RPG, one of the most important things is character progression. And in this case, they had a really flexible system. You picked a class from the start, but there were only so many classes and they didn't really actually mean all that much. They gave you a few starting stats from body, swiftness, strength, willpower, intelligence, and charisma, but those stats don't mean too horrible much. What's more important is your race, because your race caps out some of those stats. So that's more of your endgame decisions, is in your race. But even me, I played a human, and I decided that I wanted to be a hand-to-hand fighter. No melee weapons, just my fists. And focus on health, obviously, because if you're going to be getting up close and personal, you're going to have quite a lot of health. That means that human really isn't the right choice, but despite that, it's been working out really great. I've got a lot of flexibility in the way I can build. I could go into dodge and quickness to make up for my lack of body stat, which means that I'm going to have a lot less health. The other side effect of a system like this is that once you've finished your build and you've gotten through the game, first thing you really want to do is play through again, because you realize the mistakes that you've made and you have ideas for all of these other classes and builds that could be really fantastic and maybe even work better than your original. I think one of the biggest problems with modern games is that they try and set up a system in which it's impossible for players to make a mistake. And when you do that, there's no reason to try it over again from the beginning. There's nothing to learn as you play. It's that kind of flexibility that lets you come up with ideas like drone-supported techno-wizards. And I love it. So the presentation is good, and the system for the RPG is good, lets you make great characters that are very interesting. But what do you do when the game gets boring? Because eventually, every RPG runs its course. Well, in this case, the game's built from the ground up with a level editor system. That means the game wants you to make user-created content. Mods, a little bit, but I think that what they're aiming at is more like the old RPG-type games that were built into StarCraft. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but the original StarCraft, under used map settings, people made full-on RPGs. The level editor for this game feels a little bit similar to the old StarCraft editor when I've had a look at it. It's all about triggers and building from a limited tool set, but the door is open for you to import all of the tools that you would need to make anything. What I would like to make, or see made, is a sort of like a medieval game built into the Shadowrun thing, because I think that would be really creative and somewhat more unique in this space. I think that we're going to see a lot of very fun sort of full conversion mods that make everyone's own story. And that is fascinating to me. Now, I've talked about a lot of base systems and sort of abstract concepts, but what about the actual game and the experience of playing it? Well, this game focuses a lot on story, exploration, and interaction. You have to discover things to progress. I would say that only a maximum of maybe 20% of this game is actual combat, while the rest is sort of learning about the background, the environment, and using things to get what you want. See, you start the game with a sort of backstory event where you learn about a friend of yours. This is going to be minimal spoilers. It's the very, very beginning of the game. And this friend of yours puts you on an investigation. I won't give you any more details than that. And so, since you're just trying to discover what the deal is with this investigation, you've got a very specific set of things that you're trying to learn. They put you in the map and they give you little tidbits of info, trying to lead you to the next area. Now, you'd think that would mean that you can go wherever you like. That's not really it. It's actually quite linear, which is interesting. It's a very directed experience. You can't find information that leads you to anywhere but the next area. Now, you do get conversation options, and I'm a little disappointed with the way the conversation options work. They feel more flexible than they are. Sometimes you'll get a conversation option that will lead to a different outcome in the fight. You don't have to fight a guy, or they give you different information, or you lose a quest item that you didn't need to, that you could have used for something else. Or maybe you get a nice, unique item that's used for something specific to make a later fight easier. I have a story of something that really reminds me of what's so cool about this game. So, I had to go and I had to find a character named Paco. And this character tried to get me to rush because there was something that he needed to accomplish. He had a fight that he had to get to. And I was like, well, I have this clue earlier that I discovered on this computer that I didn't need to discover that mentioned a meat market in this area. Do you know anything about this meat market? And he's like, yeah, it's just down the street, but I got to go to this fight, so we need to get to that fight. And I was like, well, I want to investigate this clue because I feel like I might get some information that'll be useful later. So I go to this meat market, and apparently this meat has been used very frequently. I had a receipt for meat that I discovered in an apartment on a computer, and so they said, well, this meat isn't really usually used for eating for people. It's usually used for feeding these hounds that are commonly used for fighting. And I was like, that's interesting. Well, I've got this receipt, so could you just give me that meat real quick? It was just one of the several conversation options in there. And so he gave me the meat, and I got the quest item. And later, I got into this area in the fight that Paco was trying to get me to go to so badly that there were hellhounds in a cage. And because I had the meat, I could pass through the cage without the hellhounds trying to kill me. And if I hadn't, I would have still had to have gone through that cage, but I would have had to have fought them. And they were quite difficult. And that's very, very clever use of interactivity. I could have completely missed it. I could have gone through the entire game without even knowing that existed. Very good. Very fantastic. It just makes it feel like you've got that freedom that games should be giving you. But that's not the only example of good writing in this game. All of the characters are also very quirky and interesting. There's a coroner named Dresden, and I love the name Dresden because I'm a fan of Jim Butcher's books, but that's a whole other story. This coroner is not just like, they could have just phoned it in. They could have just had a no-name, bland coroner. He doesn't like people. He's totally antisocial, like any cliched coroner you can imagine. But instead, Dresden is a very kind, friendly character toward you. He's one of the few characters early on that gives you trust, because you're just a Shadowrunner. You're one of these people who's sort of a criminal of society, so most people wouldn't trust you. And instead, this coroner's really willing to help you out. He doesn't ask for anything in return. They mention that he has a kind light in his eyes, and so instead of being somebody who's standoffish and just a boring, bland character, he's very three-dimensional. You wanna know what makes this coroner so insistent on working with dead people and not living people. He could, since he's so friendly, work with people just as easily. So what in his past has made him like that? Or, inversely, What is it that has made this character, who is normally not a person that likes to deal with people, so friendly toward you? And I feel like pretty much every character in the game that I can think of is that way. There's something deep, something interesting, something not quite cliche about them, except for you. Your character, while you do create a sort of three-dimensionalness to them, it's not something that they do so much. For example, I play a character that I have decided doesn't like to say over much. I tend to pick the conversation options that are the least wordy, but I also don't like to pick unkind options. I feel like my character doesn't like to be rude, but also doesn't like to be forced into situations where they have to say these long monologues, you know? She sort of keeps to herself, but she cares about people. So, I don't know if that's good design making me do that, or just my obsession with forcing characters into everyone I play as in games. I don't know, but it is very interesting that that has happened. Now, the last good thing I want to talk about in the game is sometimes there is creativity during combat. For example, there was a fight where I would get bonus, I'm going to call it experience, for not killing these sort of civilian characters. They're being controlled by another character in the fight. And so if I don't kill them, I get bonus XP at the end of the fight. There were a lot of options in the fight on how I could go about this. I could knock them out with concussion grenades. Not a very reliable technique. They only go to sleep if they're like completely out of AP. It's sort of unreliable. I'm not sure what mechanism causes it, but sometimes the concussion grenades fully knock them out. Sometimes it doesn't. I could hack in with one of the Decker characters to the computer system, and then kill the opponent Decker character inside the computer system, and then deactivate the control mechanisms that way. Or I could walk up with one of my characters, run across through the very dangerous battlefield, and kill the Decker, physically, where he's actually standing, and then hack into their computer system, the system that he was using. And even then, I have two options. I can, if I am good enough with computers, with the decking skill, I can gently eject the people's control, the computer control over those people. Or, if I'm not good enough with computers, I can forcibly eject them. And I wasn't sure what that would do at first, so I was really hesitant to do it. But it deals damage to them, but if they haven't taken much damage already, then it won't kill them. And there are other examples of this. They're interactable objects on a lot of maps that'll help you in the fight, or maybe not help you. You don't really know what they do all of the time. Things you can pick up, key cards for computers that you can use to change the battlefield with the computers. It's most of the big interesting fights will have something in them that'll make the fight more complex than just hit them in the face until they stop moving. And I think that that's one of those things that a lot of games lack. Interaction in a combat outside of the normal combat system. Something that makes you think in a different way. Because if you don't do something that makes you think differently from fight to fight, then you just start going through the same motions over and over again. And that's how gameplay gets repetitive. But I think that's about enough about the good things about the game. There are some bad things I've got to talk about. First, the game just isn't very high in action. If you're looking for something action-oriented, something that's fun to watch, this isn't it. It's just not. Every single individual object, every single feature of the game is not geared toward being high in action. It's geared toward methodical, thought-provoking gameplay. One of the examples of this is that there's no voice acting. There's just none. It's all text. Now, part of it being all text is refreshing. It forces you to get invested, because in a game that has some text, some voice acting, you tend to just ignore the text, skip through the text as fast as you can, and only listen to the voice acting. In a game that's all voice acting, you can just not really be paying attention to the screen, and you sort of check out mentally every time there's a cutscene in which there's voice acting. In this, if you want the story, you have to be paying attention to every individual part of the storyline. And there are things you can miss. You learn that real fast. There are all sorts of things that if you're not reading everything, you're just not going to understand. You're going to lose an actual in-game advantage if you're not on top of things. But, you know, that's not really all there is to it. See, a game that when you're watching it, a game like this should be fun to bring your friends over. You can't, like, call your roommate over and say, hey, look at this, because they're just gonna be like, dude, this is boring. This is about as fun to watch as golf.
Not in such a bad place, a good angle. You can get a clean contact with this, you can hit it close.
Is it got a nice line, nothing behind it, no bark behind it?
Well, I mean, there is, but it's the sort of shot that he would hit down on anyway. So it's really not that bad. Very good contact, unfortunately.
Oh, beautiful shot.
But that's not really all I wanted to talk about. There's something else that bothers me. It's a tactical RPG. Typically, even in the older tactical RPGs, you have a lot of different equipment slots. You have a lot of gear that drops off of your opponents. And this game just doesn't have it. It's sort of bizarre. It feels out of place. I keep on waiting for somebody to drop a knife or a gun or something, and nobody drops any of their stuff. Now, why would that be? I feel like it has something to do with the idea that you are a Shadowrunner and you get paid a reasonable amount for jobs. And since they're giving you jobs over and over and over and over again, you expect a significant amount of money to be given to you. And if you have a bunch of money and then you also have gear that you're supposed to be able to sell, then you're going to have so much money that the game loses its difficulty curve. I'm not sure if that's really it, and I don't think that's good enough justification. But I just gotta think of something that they would... What possible logic would they have? But that's not the most bizarre out of everything. One of the things that's really bizarre is the karma system. You don't get experience in this game, you get karma. Now, you think about the implications of karma being your experience system, and you realize that if it's not implicitly stated, things can get real confusing real quick. See, this game's got a lot of choices, and you're a Shadowrunner. You're the dirt, you're the undercity, you're the scum and villainous underbelly of society. You shouldn't always be making the moral choice, the choice that would get you karma. So you have to break character to get your karma, that is your XP to level your character? Does karma actually mean making the more moral choices? Do you get less if you make immoral choices? No one says. It's not stated in the game what actually gets you your karma. So I have to make my assumptions. And I'm going to play the character as I feel the character should be played. I'm going to be nice to folks, but in the end, I'm concerned with my own survival. I'm a Shadowrunner. That's what we do. We make money, we get paid. But that's not the worst. The worst and most irritating part of this game is that there is no way to save. Auto-saving is the only way to save your progress. Now, autosaves are infrequent, and the message that pops up when it does it is short and small, easily missed. Now, fortunately, it autosaves at about the same times every time it autosaves, which is when you finish a mission, when you start a mission, when you finish a mission, when you start a mission. But there's a problem with that. Let's say I just did a very long mission. I'm probably ready to get to work to do something else, to move on with my life. So I get back to base, and what's the thing you always do when you get back to base with money? Well, this is the only place with vendors, so you go to the vendors and you buy and sell some stuff. Then, once you've bought and sold some stuff, that's time to log out, time to quit, time to exit the game. So you exit the game, and when you come back, lo and behold, you don't have any of the items that you bought, and your money's back. Well, that wouldn't be so much of a problem, except that you never really enter the character menu except when you're buying and equipping items. So, you just go right on to the next mission, not knowing that all of your levels that you've gotten are no longer spent as they were. All of your money that you've gotten is no longer spent on items. You don't have those items equipped. If you had items in your inventory that you meant to sell, your inventory is now full, and you haven't sold those items. So you go on to the next mission entirely unprepared and not knowing why. That is a problem. Now, I'm hoping that they realize their error and that they fix this. I can understand why they wanted to do it. I understand their decision making. They wanted it to feel like the decisions you made during the mission were significant, and that you can't just go and take those back. You can't autosave, make a decision, and decide you didn't like it and go back. But damn it, people who care about that, people like me, they're not going to go back anyway. The people who would have gone back, they don't care about the significance of their decisions. They just want to breeze their way through the story. And that is not, I repeat, that is not your target audience. Your target audience are mature enough to make those decisions on their own. But that is a nitpick. It may be a passionate nitpick. It may be a nitpick that I'm willing to vent on, but it's a nitpick nonetheless. This game is phenomenal. Overall, I would buy this game 100 times over. Please, 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 if you like RPGs, give this game a chance. This has been 80 Proof Gaming, and I'll see you tomorrow.